What's up YouTube? So today I'm going to be bringing you this league starter that I put together. I'm not sure if I'm going to be starting it, but oh man, that's not a good look. But basically, this is Toxic Rain Berserker, and this character currently is using the passive tree with no damage points or damage nodes, and almost everything is from and all of the damage is from the gems. And that just goes to show how powerful Toxic Rain is with 0 damage nodes on a tree. And you can see here that I'm able to maintain Berserk. Because I'm a Berserker, I'm going to tell you how exactly you can have nearly 50 to 60 or 70% Berserk uptime throughout the entire map. And overall, the skill is a blast to use. I played Toxic Rain in the Gauntlet, and I think it's pretty much just buffed since then. But in the Gauntlet, I did play it as Raider, but playing as a Berserker allows you to get a lot more damage and speed, and I'll just tell you why in a little bit. But basically, this League Starter is super solid. As you can see, it does all the damage you need on it with no damage nodes on a tree. You pretty much just need a bow, and this is with SSF gear I found on the Gauntlet. And this is a T16 map, and you can see that it can actually clear it pretty well. But let's get straight into the skill and mechanics and why exactly you should play Toxic Rain. This is the Toxic Rain skill gem. So basically, Toxic Rain is kind of a bow skill, but also mixed with a spell skill. So it scales really well based off gem levels. And if you read the description, it says to fire arrows into the air that rain down around the targeted area, and it deals damage to enemies that they hit and create spore pods when they land, and each spore pod deals chaos damage over time to nearby enemies and slow their movement speed. So it can actually stack up to 5 spore pods, and so this means that you can pre-stack damage for bosses. So this is the character that I'm actually will be using to demonstrate all of this. So you will have 2 Toxic Rains. One will be on a Focused Ballista totem. And the reason you want the Focused Ballista Toxic Rain is because it applies a lot of stacks of Wither, and Wither increases the chaos damage the mobs will be taking. You can see here, you put down your Spore Pods, and then you put down more Spore Pods, and I think a target can be hit by 5 Spore Pods. So the damage you could actually do really depends on if the mob stays still. So if the mob runs out of the Toxic Rain Pods, then you'll be doing a lot less damage. So that's one of the annoying parts about the skill, is that the mob has to be kind of stationary, or you have to predict where the mob will go. So basically, this is perfect for bossing, right? Because a lot of times the boss will be spawning, and then you put down all your pods and you'll immediately kill it. And you'll do an insane amount of damage. But there are downsides, like I say. You also have to kind of get used to how many times you have to cast in order for a pack to die. But basically, the skill's base damage is just absolutely crazy. It doesn't really need AoE to scale that well. You only need 21 AoE radius to reach the max amount of stacks. And it also scales with projectile damage, but in the end, it's best scaled with skill gem levels. So now a lot of people ask me, why exactly am I playing Berserker? Am I crazy? Berserker does not seem like anyone would ever play the skill, right? Because if you go on PoE Ninja and you look at Toxic Rain, in Expedition League, I do not think there's a single person playing Berserker. 0 Berserker Toxic Rain players. So you might think I'm just crazy, right? But why Berserker? It offers 40% more damage with the Ascendancy node, Aspect of Carnage, so this node right here. 40% more damage already. But that's not even the most important part. The most important part is you get high Berserk uptime with Warbringer and using General's Click Cry on left click with Call to Arms. So you can see here, I put General's Cry on the left click, and every time you War Cry, you get 20 raid, and that means you have pretty short War Cry duration. So every time you War Cry, your rage will go back up, and this is with no mobs around. There's more mobs around, your War Cry will, you will generate more rage because it's based off of how many mobs are around you. So overall, this leads you to be able to run Berserk and have a really high uptime. And Berserk is super important because Berserk is one of the main ways that you can get move speed on builds after the huge nerf to movement speed. Berserk is a movement speed multiplier, and if you get the helmet chant, it's 26% more move speed. And this is one of the few ways that you can actually get 300% more move speed. And in order to get 300+% move speed on builds nowadays, you're pretty much only left with either self-chill, which is also a movement speed or action speed multiplier, or having near perma berserk. So you'll see a lot of the best builds in the game, and the fastest builds rely on having high Berserk Uptime, and that includes self-cast Forbidden Right, which uses Warlord's Mark to generate the rage you need. So this alone is the main reason why I think Berserker is super strong, which is the Berserk Uptime and having a more move speed multiplier. Move speed in the end is the most important thing to being able to clear maps fast. And then you can also choose to be more defensive with Defiance charges, or you can use Rite of Ruin for even more attack speed and movement speed. So if you look here, this is actually a Lightning Strike tree that I will be making a video of later on. But Defy Pain gives you 25% increased armor per Defiance, and you can get up to 250% increased armor at 10 stacks. So a lot of times you'll be at like 7 or 8 stacks. So this is actually huge in terms of defense, or you can do Rite of Ruin, which will actually increase your movement speed by even more. So that's why we choose to be Berserker. It is insanely fast. It does provide enough defenses because Marauder defense is also slightly buffed, especially the starting nodes, because armor is going to be such a good, form of defense, since these nodes are percent armor and percent life now, and that allows you to have a bigger molten shell and be more tanky. So now we'll be looking at the gear that I'm using for Toxic Rain, and there are a lot of different gear options, but I'm just going to go over the ones I have in my POB. I do have 2 sets of gear on, a bad gear and game gear. Keep in mind, this bad gear that I have on here is all solo self-found from the Gauntlet race, and I pretty much just put my character's gear on there. And I will go over the weapons and all the armor pieces and talk about some of the choices you can have. So this is a short bow, and it looks pretty crazy, right? But it's a 6-link bow from the Porcupine cards. And then you use a Dread Essence to get +2 bow gems, because I think the bow is only eye level 50. And then after that, you have to put on Cannot Roll attacks, and then you exalt it, and then you're guaranteed to get +1 gems, because it's the only non-attack mod on it. And then you pretty much just craft on Chaos Damage over time multi. You can also use a Quill Ring in the beginning of the game, but this is pretty much the bow I was using. And then this is a Hunter Quiver. Now all you're looking for on this quiver is Chaos Damage over time multi and life. There's also another damage over time multi mod on it that you can get, but that makes it a lot harder to roll. Every time you add an extra mod on an item, the item becomes infinitely harder to roll. But basically, in the beginning, you could just use any life and resist quiver, and then afterwards, you can try to get chaos damage over time. If you're super endgame, you can get a double dot multi bow. So even in the endgame gear, I didn't put the best of the best gear. Helmet, you have a lot of different options. Devoto's Devotion is the one I'll personally be using. You want to get Berserk increased effect on it. I know a lot of people like Toxic Rain damage, but if you're a Berserker, Berserk effect is some of the best damage and best clear speed you can possibly get as an enchant. Now, this helmet's pretty nice. It gives you some chaos res, but more importantly, it gives you a lot of armor and evasion along with attack speed. And it also gives you some dex, which helps out with spell suppression with the node of Mage Blood, or Mage Bane, I think. Mage Bane. But this is pretty much a more damagey and clear speed option. It gives you the move speed you want, and it really boosts the move speed. You can see the move speed of the build is around 296%. Now there is another option, which is to use Verdi's Veil, and Verdi's Veil is pretty nice because you can use Enlighten on it, and it actually gives you +2 to level of Enlighten, allowing you to run auras easier. And if you use a blue ring, like one of these things, then you can actually get hexproof. And that's actually a pretty big deal, especially if you're playing hardcore or you want to be a little bit tankier. Getting cursed is really, really annoying, and it also limits the amount of maps that you can run. Now, next we have the body armor. And the body armor is honestly a piece that has a lot of different options. You can get the Restless Defiance, which gives you Onslaught effect, and this build does allow you to have nearly permanent uptime on Onslaught. So that's why Onslaught effect is super nice. So you can see the Restless Defiance brings the move speed up a lot. And you can see Devoto's Devotion actually adds a lot, because every single amount of move speed gets multiplied because of Berserk effect. So the Restless Defiance, Queen of the Force gives you even more move speed. Also gives you a bunch of evasion. It brings the evasion up to 69%. And it brings the move speed up to 321%. And then this is another cheap chest that gives you a lot more damage, because it has 80% chaos damage, while at the same time having a lot of armor and evasion. It's got Cherubim's Maleficence, or whatever you call it. Or you could just get a life chest, a rare 6-ly, or even Carcass Jack. So this chest piece is a very wide open slot for you to do. And then the gloves, if you want the most damage, you want to get a hunter gloves and get chaos damage over time multi with life on it. This is my gloves from the gauntlet, so you can pretty much just use a life and resist gloves and it doesn't really matter. Boots, you'll want to use a series step to get some spell suppression and life, and it has a lot of move speed. Later on, I think you can maybe get like tailwind boots if you can proc tailwind, or anything with some more resist. But this is a super solid piece of item, boots, and it should be relatively affordable since it's farmed from Aziri. You will probably want to get the enchant regenerate life if you've been hit recently, because of the fact that we have pretty bad life regen recovery rate, even though we are a marauder. But you could also get attack and cast speed if you killed recently. Amulet, you want to be looking for a hunter amulet, and you want to allocate corruption. Corruption is the highest DPS option, and it gives you 35% increased effect of Wither. It's a crimson black oil. I think another one that's pretty good is the skill duration one, Potency of Will, and the Sepia Opalescent. So it is a lot cheaper, but basically corruption I think is the highest. As usual, you can use what's it called, Path of Building, and it will show you what the highest damage anoint is if you sort by dot DPS. So this is just a hunter amulet. Ideally, if you have endgame gear, you want to get an amulet with +1 chaos skill gems, chaos damage over time multi, life, and you want to craft on area of effect. Because it's very important you get this AoE radius to 21 so that you're able to get maximum overlap, which is 5. Now let's move on to the rings. Rings, you need a 1 hunter ring with curse enemies on hit with despair, and you pretty much just want to fill it out with some life, mana, or resist, anything of that sort. And then another ring can be whatever. Vermilion ring will give you the most life in general. You could also try to craft these with this new essence that gives you damage over time multi, and ideally you probably want the damage over time multi with life and some resist on a vermilion, or an iolite ring for more chaos damage. Now this belt here, you can use an elder or hunter belt, and you want to get life and percent life, and then the rest you want to be resist. Now here you can see I added on some armor and evasion because of the buff to grace and determination, and currently POB does not actually simulate how much armor and evasion you actually get. So that's why this belt here has the added 22,000 armor and 40% evasion. And then you probably want to get a craft which is from Veiled Mod to regenerate life during any flask effect, as life regen is going to be an issue with this build, as recovery is the biggest problem. Now for flask, you have a little bit of a lot of options. I usually run a bubbling divine, life flask of staunching, enduring eternal mana flask of warding. So you want to always keep this up, and this is how we actually regenerate our mana, because we do attack a lot. We don't really have any mana gain on a hit, and mana gain on a hit does not really work that well with Toxic Rain. So unfortunately, an enduring eternal mana flask is almost mandatory. And then if you want to be super defensive, I usually go a Granite Flask of Iron Skin, Jade Flask of Reflexes, and then Ample Quicksilver Flask of Adrenaline. This can be an Alchemist Quicksilver if you want even more movement speed. So there are a lot of different options, but that's the one that I am choosing currently. And now the rest of it is just jewels. For jewels, you kind of want to just look for chaos damage over time multi and percent life, so you can set up a search for that. And there's the large clusters of medium cluster jewels, depending on what you will actually go for. And I do think some of the gear will be kind of expensive, especially the large cluster with 8 passives. Maybe you can go with 9 passives early on, but basically that's almost all of the gear, and I hope that it gives you a lot of different options. You do see that most of this gear can be self-crafted. For the ring, you can do Reforged Caster with Harvest. For the amulet, you can do Reforged Chaos, more likely, until you get Chaos Skill Gems and Chaos Dot Multi. Gloves is pretty much Reforged Chaos or just some life. And the bow is extremely easy to craft, and so is the quiver. So all of this gear I was able to get in the gauntlet, all crafted with Harvest, and I do think the gear will be plentiful enough even with everyone playing Toxic Rain. So now I wanted to talk quickly about the different jewels that are needed. I do provide a lot of different trees. There's a 2-cluster endgame tree, the regular endgame tree without 2 clusters. There's a level 90 tree, and there's even a Scourge Call to Arms, so you don't go down here to get Call to Arms. So for the clusters, you can see you need a large cluster with 8 passive points, and then usually for the notables, you want Unholy Grace, Misery Everlasting, and Wicked Paul. There's a lot of different options, but most of the notables are going to be very good on Chaos, and these ones are pretty easy to roll because they're pretty high weight. So if you just do Reforged Chaos, more likely you are bound to get it in not too long. So you can probably buy a jewel, or if you're a crafter, you can craft it yourself and sell it for a profit after a while. Now for Marauder, there's something interesting to note is that in order to get rage when we use General's Cry, we will need to take this Warcry Mastery that gives you minimum of 10 power. And then with this node Warbringer over here, it will give you rage. So Warcries grant 10 rage per 5 power, and since we get 10 power, we get 20 rage. So that means that we Warcry very consistently. So what we want is we want to use this jewel here that lead by example, and this is the Exert medium cluster jewel. And this allows us to gain Onslaught, and this means that our Onslaught will pretty much be up 24/7. So we're pretty much a raider, right? And then this one here, Warning Call, gets 25% increased armor per 5 power. So this means that you get 50% increased armor every time you Warcry, and if there's any enemies nearby, it's 100% increased armor. You can see we have 33k armor here. Without this node, it goes down to 24k. So you can see the Warcry is an insane buff, and this thing will almost always be up because when we play, we have the Warcry on our left click, and we pretty much will be Warcrying the entire time. So that's the little bit of nice synergy we have going on. And then this is one of the clusters you can use for medium clusters. This one is an increased effect of curses, and this allows you to get increased duration, despair curse effect, which is really nice. And then you have culling against cursed enemies. I do have another curse cluster you could also use. This is a projectile damage one, and this is repeater and shrieking bolts. And projectile damage is really good in terms of scaling toxic rain damage. And then this also gives you some attack and cast speed, and this one is 35% increased damage. And then lastly, like I said, for the jewels, you pretty much are just looking for life, chaos damage over time multi. And if you wanted the jewel to be super good, you could also get, I think, generic damage over time multi on top of it. So now we move on to what pretty much changed the most in the skill tree. And the skill tree is kind of crazy, right? This is a 122 point tree. I did lower I do have a level 90 tree with a slightly less points just to see how you would level. And a lot of this is kind of interchangeable. It really depends on if you can afford the clusters and what you actually want to do. Because a lot of times how it works is that clusters ends up being the better damage option, but you need to have enough points to take all of the clusters. So the more late game you get and the more clusters setup you can get because you're higher level, the better the damage will be and it'll be more efficient. So even with the masteries on the tree, clusters I think still end up winning out. And so if you can get 2 clusters, it's probably going to be the best, but you do have to be very sparing in the points you end up taking. So you see here, Marauder, you go out this life way and you take these life nodes because they're extremely efficient. And then down here, you want to take the max res because max res is always very, very good for preventing damage. And then you get 1% max lightning res because I do think lightning is the most dangerous element. Now you go down here, you get the cluster here. And the reason why you go down here, and it's kind of weird, right? Because there's a lot of points wasted, is because of the fact that you want to get Call to Arms. And Call to Arms makes our war cries instant. Now this is why I provided another tree without this area, because it is possible to Scourge on your gear Call to Arms. So that's the nice part about Scourge League, is that you can get some gear that's completely game changing for the build. And you can see here, because of that Scourge Call to Arms, you will get an entirely different tree. So here I do take the reservation efficiency, and I do include this because I do think it's unreasonable to have like a super high level Enlighten early on. So you pretty much just have to play with the mana. If you have Enlighten, you would not need to take those mana nodes there. And if you have Enlighten 4, then it'll be even better. But if you don't have the Enlighten and you don't want to take those nodes, you will have to drop Defiance Banner, which is a 10%. And that is one of the big differences between Champion and Berserker, is that you do get a free banner with Champion. But once you get the Enlighten, you can also fit it in yourself. And you will have to probably take these nodes for the mana efficiency. Now, like all builds, you usually take 2 life masteries, which is increased life. And then another one, which is plus 50 life. Did I take it here? Where do I take the cluster at? Oh yeah, here you have 50 life, and then this is 10 life, 10% increased life. Now you go up here, you get the duration, and then you take the duration mastery, which gives you more skill effect duration. And then this Mage Bane gives you quite a bit of spell suppression chance, so I decided to take it for 1 point. I think it gives you 21%, and this is based off how much dex you have. Then you come down here, you get the Jewel Socket. Then you get this Bow Cluster. This Bow Cluster is pretty nice, gives you a lot of damage. Gives you 6% move speed, some more evasion rating, and it also gives you access to a Bow Mastery. And this Bow Mastery gets you 20% AoE, which is actually huge for trying to get this AoE radius to 21. Now over here, you go up here, take another Aura Reservation Cluster for more Reservation Mastery. And this one is mandatory. You always want to take this one because it gives pretty efficient, large amount of mana reservation efficiency. And then you go down here this route to get some spell damage suppression, some more percent life, and then some more efficient life nodes over here. And then here you take this chaos, wheel, because it gives you 20% increased effect of withered. And these nodes right here are incredibly efficient in terms of the amount of damage it gives. Then you go up here, get some more damage over time and duration, some more chaos damage and move speed. And then you have this other bow cluster here that allows you to get phasing on kill and 8% increased move speed. And here, these nodes are really important, and make sure you need to take it for the Evasion Mastery to get Grace as 25% increased mana reservation efficiency, which allows us to run the auras a lot easier. So overall, you can see that the tree is kind of spread out a lot because of what we are playing, but it does end up being relatively efficient. You can see there's always some nice clusters or some notables to take around the area. And this is a very high level tree. If you're level 90, you'll see that we drop this top half. The damage is a little lower, but we still have our move speed that we need. And in the end, all this damage is more than enough to do all the content. This is with my SSF gear. Now, what's it called? You do see a Scourge endgame option. This does allow you to get more damage throughout everywhere. And then there's this normal endgame tree, which is around here. And this allows you to grab almost all the nodes that you need. But basically, this tree has a lot of move speed, it has a lot of damage, and the life is still enough. The evasion rating and armor is still more than enough. And I just wanted to talk next about a bit of the POB configuration and how you can actually see the damage of the build. So in this POB configuration, you can see enemy hit damage is 5,000. Now this is something that a lot of people don't really put in, but most hardcore people put it in because it allows you to see exactly how much you actually mitigate when you get hit by something a lot. So you can see this thing goes up to nearly 90% when it's not 5,000. And to keep in mind, Frenzy Charge is something you click if you run Blood Rage, and it does add a lot of damage. And you probably will be able to run Blood Rage. You can even use Anomalous Blood Rage to get Frenzy Charges on bosses. Onslaught will almost always be up because we're constantly war crying. Phasing is the same thing. If we have killed a mob, we'll have phasing up. Rage is set at 40 because normally we have 60 rage maximum, but usually when you berserk, you do not have actually 60 rage. So that's why I put it at that amount. And let's see. So let's put it on the Queen of the Forest here. So now we have you been hit recently? And this thing makes it so the life regen you get from your boots, and most of the times you have been hit recently, so you can see you have this amount of life regen. Have you war cry in the last 8 seconds, and this war cry you see means if we have armor, and because we'll always be war crying every 4 seconds, it will always almost be up. And this is the amount of war cry power we'll have, and overlapping pods. So this is the point of contention, because most of the times if you put one pod down, it'll always have one. Almost guaranteed it'll have 3 to 4 pods up at all times on an enemy unless it moves out. 5 is a little harder, but as long as you have around 21 AoE radius, you should almost always have around 5 pods hitting a single target. And wither stacks is 15 because if you put down totems, you will have 15 wither stacks the whole time. But keep in mind that during mapping, you won't always have all of the wither stacks because you won't be putting on 15 wither stacks at all times. But like POBs, this damage is for bossing when you have everything up and it's pre-stacked, and it's not like a very good comparison for mapping, like the mapping damage you'll do. But this is for Cyrus, right? If you do standard, obviously it's going to be a lot more. So you can see around that this build will probably have around this amount of damage the whole time. But hopefully that clears up some issues with pods, because a lot of people don't really know how someone has so much more damage, but you just have to see how many pods they have set, if they have frenzy charges, and berserk is going to be up, so that's why I have berserk included in the damage calculations. But yeah, So anyhow, let's get on to the next part, which is the skill gems that you'll be using for this build. And here is the skill gems that you'll be using. Now this is kind of a little bit confusing, but there are a lot of toxic ray stuff that you can use. So in the main weapon, you're supposed to use toxic ray, efficacy, empower, void manipulation, vicious projectiles, faster attacks, or you can use mirage archer. I think I prefer mirage archer over faster attacks. But this is with an empower setup on the bow with +2 support gems. So if you don't have this bow, then you want to use this other one. This is the one I use in the gauntlet. I use Toxic Rain, Efficacy, Vicious Projectiles, Mirage Archer, Faster Attacks, Void Manipulation. And now you want to have another 6 link, but you can also keep it a 5 link. And you will use Toxic Rain, Efficacy, Ballista Totem, Multiple Totems, Focus Ballista, Withering Touch. Now the reason why you want this is the one that puts the withers down. So you put down 5 totems, and each one of them every time they attack will apply a wither stack because of Withering Touch. So you'll pretty much have 15 withers up on the boss almost instantaneously, and man, Berserker attacks pretty fast. Now next, those are your 2 main damage links. Now the body armor does not really need to be 6 linked, and 5 link is fine. Now the helmet, you want to have Determination, Malevolence, Grace, Enlighten. Now your mana issues will be solved if you got Enlighten pretty early on. Now if you don't have an Enlighten, you probably will just have to not run Defiance Banner. I do put Defiance Banner in the other link, and not running Defiance Banner saves you around like 6% mana or so. So depending on your mana situation and what flat mana you have on your gear and whether you have Enlighten or not, this will be determined whether you can run Defiance Banner or not. And for your defensive layer, you will have cast when damage taken, Vol Molten Shell. And you will have to manually cast Vol Molten Shell when you want to use it. But then the cast when damage Molten Shell will still be able to be used. And you can also put increased duration on it. Now next, you want to have Berserk. And Berserk is the skill that you'll be using once you have the rage. So once you have the rage, you press your Berserk button. And you're just going to be Berserked. And you're going to be owning, right? So it's going to be super, super good. And next, this is going to be your movement skill, Flame Dash, Life Tap, Second Wind, Withering Step. And then you might want to replace like one of these links with General's, or you need General's Cry. So you need to find something to drop. You can either drop Second Wind or something like that. But basically, Life Tap makes it so you don't have to depend on your mana. And a lot of times you might be low on mana because you messed up pressing your mana flask. So that's why you have Life Tap, so you can get out of stuff and you don't want to end up like Darky and die because you're unable to dash out because you don't have mana. Now Withering Step is the buff you press, so you can see those little eyes come out. It does give you elusive, and it also gives you, what's it called? It applies Wither, so you can do this for like pretty much like a DPS cooldown. You wither and but you have to keep in mind this Withering Step removes the Flame Dash charge, so you need to be wary about that. And then General's Cry is pretty much what you'll be using to generate the rage, and you'll be pretty much clicking this as often as it is up on cooldown. Only real annoying part about this build is your character will be yelling a lot, right? So it's kind of annoying. But basically that's pretty much all the links, and you have Despair on your ring for Curse on Hit setup. Main thing to notice is the difference in links depending on the weapon you're using. Now mapping tips, the biggest mapping tip I possibly have for this build is to not overcast Toxic Rain. So if you go, you pretty much want to find out the sweet spot of how much you need to cast. And this is something you will just have to learn to play with the build. And Berserk Uptime is huge. So if you forget to press Berserk, you're going to lose a lot of move speed. So this is why this build is not exactly the best, like, what's it called, build if you're like super new to the game. Because there are more buttons to press than usual. So you can see you just want to press one button and probably press Withering Step, and then you can see that the dot damage doesn't enough to kill it, right? So you don't need to like, what's it called, stay here and keep casting until you see all the mobs dying, and that's probably the biggest thing. And make sure to keep your Berserk up. And usually you don't need to ever drop totems, but you can see if the map's a little harder, there's like some chaos res on it, you can drop totems to like instantly stack the, what's it called, the Wither stacks on the boss or whatever. And in terms of elusive, you pretty much want to press Withering Step kind of quite often just so you can get the short little burst of speed from elusive, but you do lose it as soon as you use any other skill. But that's pretty much it. You can also use Smoke Mine as a movement skill if you want, or Flame Dash, but I personally prefer Flame Dash because it is a lot better for getting out of stuff because Flame Blast is nearly instantaneous. And there's and that's pretty much about it. You can also use Vol Blight if you want, and that gives you pretty much hinder enemies take 20% increased chaos damage. So this could be like a little burst thing. But you will have a lot of skill gems. You will have to sacrifice some skill gems depending on what you want to run. I guess you can technically also run an unset ring to get more skill gems. And that's why in like PoE 2 and stuff like that, they'll try to give more links, because at this point, this build does have a lot of buttons to press, and that's the main distinction between Berserker and other builds, is that you have a little bit more to do in terms of Berserk management, and then this will always be on left click, so it won't be too bad. So now let's get into the juicy bit, which is how to level, and I did include a leveling tree in the POB. So I know a lot of people worry about how you're going to level Toxic Rain as a Berserker, because you don't even get the gem, I'm pretty sure, until Library Crest. So pretty much this is how you'll level the build. You pretty much get Splitting Steel. I think you can meal it on either Scion or Ranger. You can probably do it on Scion so you can get Onslaught, and Splitting Steel should carry you through most of the game, and then you'll get pretty much take the life nodes, you take some two-handed damage nodes, and you can also make sure to use the two-handed craft for fizz weapons, and that will pretty much allow you to carry you through the game, and that's pretty much just how strong steel skills are. And you path through here, and it allows you to get all of the efficient damage nodes, and then this Fury Bolt's also scales, because steel skills are actually what's it called, consider a projectile skill. And then you go over here, some more damage, and move speed. And move speed is pretty much king early on. You can technically even take these bone nodes in preparation, get phasing, and then you also get 8% increased move speed while phasing. And this is also some projectile speed and projectile damage. So you can see this alone here should carry you all the way through normal lab, as long as you're good with crafting weapons and making sure to upgrade the weapons every now and then. And at level 12, you kind of want to get the skill Shattering Steel, and you can link like Shattering Steel to a lot of different options. You can put Onslaught on it, faster attacks, vicious projectiles, and pretty much just anything that matches the tags and will scale the damage of the skill. But something to keep in mind is you don't get Shattering Steel on a Berserker or Marauder at level 12, so you probably need to get a friend, or you can buy it for like 1 transmute or whatever from someone. So maybe someone can put it into the newly improved guild stash for you. And Shattering Steel should definitely be able to carry you all the way through. And for Heralds, you can run some auras like Herald of Ash, Herald of Purity is what I run. And it should be pretty smooth sailing. This is the build that I use to level with in Gauntlet, and that's with the mobs having 40% more HP. And then once you get through the first lab, you can immediately spec into Aspect of the Carnage, giving you 40% more damage. Or you can technically do Create the Slaughter, which will give you some rage. And that's pretty much what I'll do. And this is the level 90 tree. Oh, this is the transition tree. So you see you can go up here to get the duration nodes, and then you drop these little nodes you took that are efficient for damage for while leveling. And then you can probably keep this on for a little bit, and then you take this so that once you take this node over here, when you war cry, you'll get the amount of rage that you need in order to get Berserk up. Then this thing, oh yeah, you need to take this thing for 15% reservation efficiency. Then you take all these nodes, you go up here, and because we don't really have access to to any clusters right now, we'll be taking all of these nodes. And this pretty much just makes it easier to level because it gives you as much damage as possible. And you can respec these points later on to life once you feel like it. And this is pretty much like leveling as fast as possible because it gives you the most damage without using any clusters at all. Then later on, you can start taking the jewel sockets like that. But basically, that should give you a pretty good idea of how to level the build. I do think that Berserker is the best Toxic Rain variant for softcore in terms of speed, and it also allows you to play better builds afterwards because you can swap this to the Self-Chill Lightning Strike Berserker, which I do think is one of the best builds in the game for the budget. And later on, you can even go into Accuracy Stack Juggernaut with Lightning Strike or Eternity Shroud Lightning Strike. But if you're playing a champion, you're pretty much doomed to be Toxic Rain or Corrupting Fever Tornado Shot, which some people might not enjoy. And Raider, I don't really know what you would play. You could play Lightning Strike too, but that version has slightly lower damage until you get a bunch of Frenzy charges. So this was my plan to level up, and I do think that this build is absolutely amazing. I did play it in a Gauntlet all the way through, and it is definitely viable to kill all content, including the Feared, with very little issues. as its damage is insane, and you can see it has the evasion rating and the physical damage reduction, and it will have some max res here that allows you to pretty much take on all of the end game. And Toxic Rain is a very, very good skill. The footage I showcased in the beginning was using this tree with no damage nodes. So the skill gem alone will carry you through the whole game. And at that point, your clear speed, all that really matters is the amount of move speed that you can get out of your build. And this ends up being a setup that can actually get 300+% move speed somewhat consistently. And it is a nice variation on the, all of the champions and raiders out there. So I highly recommend this build. I probably won't league start it because I do like Lightning Strike a lot more, even though I believe this build is superior to Lightning Strike at this level of budget. But thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. And you can check out my stream, and I will probably be streaming either this or Lightning Strike, depending on what catches my eye. But thanks for watching, and I hope you find more exalts at league start than I do. Bye.